Hi, I'm Carl Azus, and this is The World from A to Z. Today's show begins with a recap of the events of September 11th, 2001. Events that shocked and then changed a nation. Events that had ripple effects all across the globe. The terrorist violence that struck America 23 years ago started and ended on the same morning. At 8:46 a.m., a hijacked plane struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. There was an initial report it was a small twin-engine aircraft, but in actuality it was a passenger jet, American Airlines Flight 11. The first footage we saw showed a smoking slash not far from the top of the skyscraper, but even then, the scenes on our screens didn't yet convey the catastrophe that was taking place. We realized that at 9:03 a.m., when United Airlines Flight 175 hit the South Tower of the World Trade Center. Some sort of assault was taking place. We didn't know yet what. We didn't know how extensive it would be. A torrent of news wires started flowing in and wouldn't stop for days. At 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, later causing part of the U.S. military headquarters to collapse. These events were so massive and were happening so quickly, news reporters were just describing what they saw and trying to make sense of it. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower of the Trade Center seemed to give way near the place where the second plane had hit. The building completely collapsed. At 10:03 a.m., not 5 minutes after that, United Airlines Flight 93 crashed into a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And less than half an hour later, at 10:28, the North Tower of the World Trade Center fell. The peace of a clear Tuesday morning had been shattered indefinitely, and it had all happened in less than 2 hours.
A world of knowledge. U.S. President George W. Bush was informed of the 9/11 attacks when he was engaged in what activity? Meeting with his cabinet, visiting an auto plant, speaking at a school, signing tax legislation. President Bush was discussing the issue of education reform at a school in Florida when he was informed of the attacks.
After making a short statement about the attacks and holding a moment of silence, the president headed back to Washington, where government officials were scrambling to figure out who did this and how. The Central Intelligence Agency had an answer within hours. The Al-Qaeda terrorist group, led by a man named Osama bin Laden, had orchestrated the assault. Stateside, that involved 19 men who hijacked the 4 passenger planes and intentionally brought them down. 2,977 people were killed in New York, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. Airspace was closed over the entire country on September 11th. Rescue efforts would go on for days. Recovery would continue for years. But in his address to the nation that evening, President Bush said the attacks had failed to frighten America into chaos and that the country remained strong.
None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world.
He also said America would not distinguish between the terrorists and those who harbored them. That was a message to Afghanistan, whose Taliban leaders had given Al-Qaeda a safe place to live and train. In the months that followed, the U.S. would lead an international coalition of countries in attacks against Afghanistan. It was the beginning of what would become America's longest war. The U.S. would also rebuild the World Trade Center complex, including a museum, a memorial, and the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere, now stand at the site of the Twin Towers. The damage to the Pentagon was repaired within a year, and a memorial now stands there. And Flight 93 National Memorial was constructed at the crash site in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Before the attacks took place, the story getting the most media coverage on September 11, 2001 centered on basketball phenomenon Michael Jordan. He was expected to announce that day that he was coming out of retirement to play professionally again. That announcement, of course, was postponed when the attacks occurred, but Jordan did play again in the NBA for the Washington Wizards, and he promised to donate his $1 million salary from that season to September 11th victims and relief organizations.
Where in the world This is an East African republic that gained its independence from Britain in 1963. Its official languages are English and Kiswahili. It's located between Ethiopia and Tanzania, and its capital is Nairobi. This is Kenya, a nation of more than 58 million people.
One of those people is a former rugby player who faced adversity, found his mental health was suffering, and then found his way out of depression through cooking. Mental health is a topic we regularly cover on this show. We hope you enjoy this report from the African nation of Kenya.
Dennis Ombachi picks out some vegetables at his local supermarket
Tomatoes.
to cook for his millions of social media fans.
Let's go cook.
But before live stream cooking, Ombachi's claim to fame was rugby. He played on Kenya's national team, scoring the winning point that helped carry his country to the Rio 2016 Olympics. But the next year, Ombachi injured his ankle, effectively ending his rugby career. Ombachi became depressed. Not surprising for a professional athlete who has poured so much into a sport.
The depression, I think, it's something that has always been there, like even before I started playing rugby, but it sort of manifested itself more in my later playing days.
In 2018, he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Looking back now, Ombachi says the diagnosis was a blessing. It answered questions Ombachi had about his behavior and allowed him to move on.
Yes, I was good in sports, I was successful, but outside there, you know, when the stadium lights are off, I'm like, my life is a bit empty, so I need something else to fill it. And then I was like, yeah, I'll try food. So it was a challenge. Yeah, it sort of kept me sane, kept me through my depressive periods, and yeah, that's how my love with food started.
Now Ombachi makes simple, snappy cooking videos in 90 seconds, showing each step of a recipe. He prepares dishes from different cuisines around the world, most from places he's traveled. That's why fans fondly call him the roaming chef. His videos, most of which he films cooking outside on his balcony, have had millions of views on social media. Ombachi hopes that all the attention could someday help him open his own restaurant in Kenya.
Our cross-country call-out today takes us from the northwest to the northeast to the south, and when we say northwest, we mean Alaska. Mr. Dyer's class is at Henshu Middle School, and it's great to have y'all watching from Anchorage in the last frontier. Next, is it constitutional? It's the Constitution State. Welcome to Mr. Royal's class at Groton Middle School in Groton, Connecticut. And we arrive back in Sweet Home, Alabama at Alma Bryant High School. The Hurricanes are watching from Dr. Kahutek's or Dr. K's class. It's in Irvington.
A family dog is back where it belongs after going missing in the Colorado wilderness for nearly 2 weeks. While rafting on vacation, the Wagoner family left Pippin with a local dog sitter, but returned to discover the dog had escaped. The turn of events turned a 4-day vacay into a 10-day search operation, but eventually the Wagoners had to return home without their pet. It was only then that they got a fateful call from a Coloradoan who had found Pippin and who facilitated a tearful reunion with the family. For Take a Look at This, I'm Jeremy Roth.
A big adventure for a little dog. I'm going to hold off on the puns today. As we wrap up our September 11th show, we'd like to bring you some more images of remembrance, recovery, and restoration that have taken place since that day in 2001. We will have a recap of last night's presidential debate in tomorrow's show, so please join us again for that. I'm Carl Azus for The World from A to Z, and thank you for being the best part of this show. You mean the world to me.